I guess before we dive into some questions with the audience, I'd love to tie in what we were talking about earlier, the connection to her divorce case and Dallas in particular, how those have a really interesting tie-in about her trips back and forth. Can you share a little bit about that story, which you were telling me earlier?
With pleasure. We were talking earlier about the different connections that CALLAS had with Dallas. And it's funny, I'm just reminded, as I'm saying that, of a letter that Larry Kelly, the former director of the Dallas Opera, writes to her in the late 60s. So she hasn't sung in Dallas for quite some time. And she says, what's the point of calling it the CALLAS Civic Company? Because in those days, her performances and her productions in Dallas were became so legendary that the crowds, the opera goers used to call it the CALLAS Civic Company and not the Dallas Civic Company. But of course, there's been a lot of connections. It's as you were saying, the Dallas seasons were really tailor-made by Larry Kelly for her in 57, 58, and then 59. And she has sung there some very, very legendary performances, and especially the Medea, which you see bits of in the film in 58. It was a very extraordinary performance. And then, of course, 59, the last time she performed here in Dallas, was a special time in her life because we couldn't get into it in the film, actually, to fit in the duration of a theater film. But in 59, when she last sang here, that was in the middle of what was happening in her personal life, her divorce and the romance with Onassis, which was starting. And the scene of the divorce court, the first time that she tries to get a divorce from her husband, she was actually singing in Dallas in those days. And because of the divorce and also the publicity around it and the pressure, she had to fly back to Italy all the way. And this is 59, there was no direct flight, Dallas-Rome. So it was a long journey, and she had to fly all the way to Italy just for that day, for the court hearing for the divorce. And she was performing the day before, and she had performances coming up after. I think she only went there for 2 days and then came back to Dallas to sing. And this was actually to be the very last time she performed in Dallas. She performed an opera in Dallas. She only came once for the farewell tour. There was one stop in Dallas. But when she came back from after the divorce, and as you could see, it was so violent what happened to her in that day. She had to sing Lucia, and she cracked on a note, on a high note, which had not happened to her before. And when she came out after the scene, she told one of her very close friends who was traveling with her from Italy, who I was very lucky to meet a couple of years ago, and she told her, "My career ends here and now." And that was the last time she sang in Dallas, and that was one of the pivotal points between Maria and CALLAS, or rather between CALLAS and Maria, where she would start giving up her career to dedicate herself to her personal life.
So just for the folks that don't realize the amount of research that went into this, you found so much footage that was unearthed. I mean, I know the Frost interview we talked about earlier was only shown live and wasn't even recorded by the station. But can you talk a bit about the letters and the memoir and all that went into this? Because I think there's so much of this that people have never seen before.
Yeah. Well, it just so happens that the film was able to be created and put together because of the material that had not been seen or known before. As I'm saying, sometimes probably no one attempted to make such a film before because there wasn't the material available to make an entire film in her own words with 100% of archival material. Nothing shot, nothing created, nothing filmed, other interviews, nothing like that. And that was the fruit of a long quest, as I was saying earlier, a quest that took me for the first couple of years around the world, meeting her friends and loved ones, and some people who never exposed themselves to any, even not an interview, and accepted specifically for this project because they felt that was the right thing to do, I guess, to entrust me with a lot of the material that you see in the film, the private Super 8 home movies, the private recordings, the letters, of course, that are an important part of the film. And you see, even the letters have a connection somehow with Dallas, because this whole project started 5 years ago for me, after I stepped by the Met one night, by accident or by destiny, shall we say, the Met Opera, and it was Donizetti's Maria Stuardi and Joyce Di Donato was singing that night. And I like to think that this evening was a big inspiration for the whole project, and actually that's what got me to discover CALLAS. I barely knew who she was 5 years ago. And today Joyce is interpreting Maria's letters in the film. And I know she has been a very important artist for the Dallas Opera, and she had an opera created for her a couple of years ago, Great Scott. So there is again a connection with Dallas.
Well, I'd love to open it to the audience. Ma'am, up there?
Yes, first of all, I'm a mother, and I hope one day that my children will say things about me that let me know that I did the right thing in my life. What a tribute. And even though she didn't have children, for you to discover this and discover her, and to spend 5 years creating her story, what a gift.
Thank you so much.
And to continue with that question, can you talk a bit about, you show us a lot of her talking about her growing up and the movement from New York overseas. But can you also talk a bit about the letters that she did want to eventually have a family, but it never came to fruition. She would have given up her career for the family. I think that's one of the great moments we hear her say. That must have been something special to find that information.
I think it was a leitmotif in her life, and it's all part of that key of understanding that comes from the Frost interview in the beginning of the film, when she says there are two people in me, there is Maria and CALLAS. With that key, you understand everything else, and you understand that her whole life has been sacrificed from one to another. She sacrificed her personal life for her career, and then she sacrificed her career for her personal life, and then again the other way around. And she does say that having a family and children would have been everything to her, and that she would have given up her career, and I'm fairly sure she would have, actually. Because, you know, when Frost says at the end, if there was a battle between both, who would have to win, Maria or CALLAS? And that is an unanswered question, and I think it's maybe for everyone to answer that question for themselves. And after having had that dialogue with her throughout the film. But I like to think that on that aspect, Maria would have won if she had had a happy marriage, a happy love life, and she could have children. She would have very probably given up her career. But you see, she also says destiny is destiny, and there was no way out. And her destiny was not to have a happy family, not to have a happy personal life, though she had moments of happiness in her personal life. But the fact that she didn't have a family and children made her what she became, made CALLAS the way we know CALLAS today, and the way she's still alive and internationally well known 40 years after her passing. So that sacrifice in a way benefited the greatness of the artist. So it was probably a sacrifice that she decided was worth doing.
And she did have toy, lovely poodles. It's right here.
Félicitations, c'était merveilleux, wonderful, congratulations.
Merci.
Maybe you could just share a little antidote, how you obtained some of the home footage from friends, maybe a little story, how you got that.
There's so many stories. I could go on
So
all
maybe
night.
just one.
Well, a lot of the home movies were kept by her butler and maid, who were the two people closest to her. There were much more than butler and maid. Those are two people who spent 25 years living under the same roof, and by the end of her life, she considered them as her family and also as her only family. And that is why I decided to dedicate the film to them. Those are Bruna and Ferruccio. These were very important people in her life, and they were also the most private people after, during her lifetime, but also after her passing. They never given even a single interview, though they were harassed also by the press. You know, every time there would have been stories about CALLAS in the last 40 years, people would try to go to them and they would always refuse to see anyone. So it's nearly a miracle that they accepted to see me, to spend so much time with me, and to open their cupboards and their boxes and their attics and take out those small reel of Super 8 films that are so fragile. I mean, nothing like a dust could destroy them. And they were kept in small boxes in a non-professional way, of course, because these are just things that they gathered when they had to leave Paris after her passing. And so a lot of these treasures that we see on screen have been kept by them. And yeah, I'm ever grateful to them for this trust, and feel very humbled that I was able to bring out this material and share it with audiences today.
Have Bruna and Ferruccio seen the film?
So, Bruna passed away last August, not this August, the year before, 3 months before the film was released in France. But I was still in editing, and was towards the end of editing, and during the editing, I would call them both weekly. I would keep them updated with everything that was happening in the editing room, because this is really the place where the film was created. And so there was this connection. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to see the film, and Ferruccio did. Several months later, when the film, he couldn't come to Paris when it was released in December last year, and he watched it in Italy when it came out in the theater. He lives in a very remote village in Italy, and yeah, he said some things that I feel shy to share, but I feel that in a way I have accomplished my duty to them also.
Do you mind if we ask how much footage, how much archival elements you had going into the edit? I mean, this seems like a crazy amount of material.
I mean, between the material that was given me by her friends, and also all the material that I researched myself, that was another couple of years where I contacted every possible archive in the world, you know, film archives, institutional archives, private archives, opera houses, and I was quite helped by the Dallas Opera also with some archives. All that material at the end, when we went into the editing room, I think the footage represented over something like 40 hours, and the audio, I can't remember, probably 300 hours. You know, also because we got a lot of private recordings and so on and so forth, and we had over 500 letters to work with. So it was like a huge puzzle of scattered pieces all over the place, and the challenge was really to put all these pieces together and to select the pieces, but the goal was not to make a display of material on screen, but to tell a story, and to gather all those pieces together to tell one story, like one picture that is clear and smooth to look at. That was really the challenge, and it took us 6 months, 7 days a week, and nearly day and night of editing to accomplish that.
Got a couple questions, ma'am, right there. In the black.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not a man. Sorry. Bravo. Well done. Very entertaining film. And I'm sure that you share my hope that this earns Madame Callas some fans, that among people who've never had the chance to see this part of her life. Really wonderful in that respect. I have just a technical question. How much did you have to bring audio from 40, 50, 60 years ago back to life? How much technical, modern technical brilliance did you and your crew have to exert?
Well, everything, every audio. I mean, actually, not everything, because we also recorded some audio pieces that were the piano pieces that are adaptations of bel canto pieces that she sang. And I felt like it was necessary at some point, especially the years where she's not singing. It didn't make sense to hear her sing again at that time. So in those years of break, I felt like replacing with those musics would give the right message. But aside of the piano pieces, everything else are original recordings from the 50s and the 60s. Yeah, and
but remastered, right? Or
They have been restored and remastered by our team. We haven't taken any remastered recording that existed. We only dealt with original private recordings. That was also a choice that we made early on, was not to use studio recordings, but to use live recordings. And that choice was really kind of natural, because I knew from some of her letters and also from her friends that she didn't actually care much about her studio recordings. And she, whenever in the end of her life she would listen to her old recordings, those would always be live recordings. Because she felt that in the studio she would always have to restrain herself because of the sensitivity of the microphones and the technical equipments in those days. And on stage, some of the time she didn't even know that she was recorded. So of course it was the full CALLAS, shall we say. And so when we hear a live recording, it is 100% of what she gave on stage. So there was a huge work of getting all those old reel tapes, digitizing them, restoring them, remastering them, and the same work we undertook with the footage, because we ended up with a lot of different kind of formats, 16mm, 8mm, Super 8 films, all of that, and in different kind of preservation qualities. So yeah, that was a huge part of the post-production, to bring it all very harmoniously to modern sound and modern image as much as we could.
Ma'am, right there.
What amazing accomplishment. What drove you to do this movie, and what surprised you the most as you got into the production of the story? Surprised you most about her?
Well, what got me into that is what I said earlier, is that precisely that night in January 2013 at the Met, which was my first encounter with Italian opera, my love at first sight, and coming back to my little room in New York, the first thing that came up on internet when I searched Italian opera bel canto was an aria sung by Callas, and I had never heard Callas before, and that was the second love at first sight, or love at first hear, shall we say, of that day, and that was the beginning of it all. I didn't think I would make a movie right away, but quickly enough, and destiny helped a little bit, because I got to meet right there in New York some of the people who knew her, and I think from that moment on I knew that there was an untold story that deserved to be told. And I'm sorry, what was the second question? Oh, what surprised me? As the material kept coming in very gradually, I didn't find all the material right away. It was a quest, as I said earlier. I got to know her more and more, so I actually kept discovering things about her. And the surprising things were, I would say, first and foremost, the Frost interview, and that phrase, "There are two people in me," that was such a revelation, because I had already worked for quite a bit, maybe a couple of years, on the subject. I had read every possible book and article and everything, and I have never gotten such a key that unraveled so much understanding and deep understanding about who she actually was and what was the drive for some of her choices also in life. So that was a big surprise and revelation. And then a lot of the stories that we thought we knew in a way, but that didn't happen as we thought they happened. For instance, the Rome incident, where everyone says she was capricious and tempestuous and whatever, and more or less the press and the media said the same thing at the time of the Dallas episode when she was fired from the Met. So all of these stories that we kind of knew from the outside and from what the press had written about them, discovering the truth behind it was really surprising. And when I discovered that the letter when she writes minute by minute what happened in Rome and how she lived through it and how she was pushed on stage and all that, the violence and the injustice that was done to her, was really surprising and striking, I guess.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I have one
again,
more question. So in the movie, I mean, I knew about her life, but every time it got to the paparazzi, I tensed up because I could see it on her face and just feel how, intrusive it was. But yet I was proud of her as a woman for standing up and saying, back off, I've already told you, back off. But yet at the same time, she knew she was in the limelight, but yet she wanted that privacy too. So, it's the Maria and the CALLAS contradiction once
Right.
again.
Right.
So as you were going through this, did you intentionally, to me, I felt like it was very intentional that you included that part too.
Definitely, because, as a filmmaker, my way of creating the film was like editing an actual film rather than a documentary. So we spent quite a bit of time choosing the shots and the scenes as if we were making a movie. And as I said earlier, her life could have been, a movie or a novel, except it was real life. And I felt that those shots were really close up and really like with her walking in that airport and she's harassed by the press and the paparazzi. I felt like we needed to understand what she was going through, what it actually feels like. And I mean, yeah, it was even the goal. If you felt a little uncomfortable, that was the goal, because you can just imagine how she must have felt. You feeling uncomfortable here in your seat in a theater, how it could have felt for her being there. And I wanted to bring the truth, the reality of all of that. And this is just one episode, but of course you have to understand that that was throughout her career and the time that since she has attained world fame, and especially in the years with Onassis. This is also why, in the end, she had to hide to go see him when he was nearly dying, because the press was there and they were only waiting for one thing, is for her to go there and to make a scandal because of Jackie and everything. So how can you live a normal life, and how can you lead a life as a woman, and moreover as a woman in love, with all of that? It's very difficult, and it's definitely part of the struggle between Maria and CALLAS, for sure.
The gentleman right there, ma'am, and yeah, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Volf. That was very enjoyable. I'm wondering what you're working on next.
Nothing for the moment. Thank you though, because believe it or not, the film is coming out in 40 countries. It is totally surreal and unbelievable to me. Since it has come out in theaters in France in December 2017, it's come out all across Europe, and I've been traveling with the film, sharing it with the audiences. It's been such a privilege to do that. And I'm on a very big American tour right now. I'm in the middle of it. I was in Toronto and the rest of Canada, and then in California. I'm moving towards California again, San Francisco, and then New York. And all of that in preparation of the film coming out in the theaters in November in this country. And by the end of the year, it will come out in Asia, and I will go to Japan in December. So As you can see, I'm following her footsteps, as the farewell tour brought her to Japan in the end. And it's still part of the journey. I wrote a couple of books, not actually wrote, but I put together a lot of the material, the picture material that was entrusted to me, and unknown pictures and all of that, so that kept me busy. And now that the film is out, the books are out, and all of that is like a journey coming to an end. And I think by early next year, there will be a kind of closure. The film will continue to live its own life, and maybe I can rest for just a little and then start something new.
Question right here.
Yeah, I wanted to applaud you for something that you kept throughout the film, which was the integrity that it took for her to maintain the creative level of an extraordinary ability. An ability that is, I don't think, documentable in a sense. But you managed to somehow show the struggle between living it and letting it complete itself as a creative act.
Thank you.
As far as travels go, where's kind of the most unique place you found something, or just in your travels, in the research part of it, that was just, wow, I can't believe we found this here, or we did this here? I mean, because you did go all over the place to find material.
Again, so many of it, but Greece was part of it. Finding this amazing footage and recording of her singing in the village of Lefkas in such an uncommon way. Finding that footage in Greece was really special, among so many other things, you know, Italy and, you name it, Scotland.
I've got two questions. We'll do the far back in the back row.
It was a very sympathetic portrait of her, but did you purposefully leave out a lot of the negative things, like the relationship with her mother and her sister, and the famous lawsuit, and all of the other things that were less positive?
Not really. I don't have the feeling I have left out any aspect of her personality, and that's what mattered to me the most, was to show a complete portrait of both her personality as a woman and as an artist. And I never tried to embellish it in any way. Of course, it's a work of love, and it started as a work of love, but also with a certain dimension of objectivity, which I think was also my duty as a filmmaker, and also as a duty to her to show her in a way that was genuine. And she was all about honesty and integrity, as she says it herself. So I didn't leave aside any aspects of her personality. I did leave aside some episodes of her life, because obviously if I had to include all the episodes of her life, it would have been a 6-hour movie. So maybe more than that even. So I had to make some choices regarding the relationship with her mother. I think it says it all in the beginning of the film, with the letters. She explains very well how that relationship played out since her childhood. And that relationship almost didn't exist towards the end of her life. There was no more relationship with her mother. And you know, the lawsuits and everything, we cover a couple of it, but we couldn't cover all of that and all of the scandals. And also it wouldn't be fair to her to do a film which would cover only the scandals, because that is not only what happened in her life. This maybe some of the things that people retained a lot. But I tried to find an even balance between the career, the scandals, the personal life, find the right balance between Maria and CALLAS. So I did my best to achieve that. Don't know if I managed.
Can you tell us about the reactions from the European audiences that you've been able to show it to, compared to obviously the Canadians so far and us American audiences? Because obviously we got to see her a little bit later on in her career compared to her start in Italy especially. I would love to know the way the reactions were, especially in Italy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So far, it felt like each country, in each country, the audiences had different reactions. all and generally rather unanimously positive, thank God. But also some different ways. For instance, in Greece it was really special. It was only the second country where it came out after France. And in Greece, for them, she was Greek. She was of Greek parents, so there was this kind of connection to her Greek roots, and also to the actress, to the tragedienne that she was, you know, almost like some of those mythical Greek actresses playing tragedies. So they related to that aspect. Italy related to her as being an Italian because, of course, the greatest part of her career, aside of America, happened in Italy. In Europe, at least, it was in Italy at La Scala. So for them, it was those Scala years that were important. They related to, and then in America, it's about her being American because she was born in New York, and though not all people know that, she gladly considered herself being an American, and I think the audiences here relate to that, relate to her being an American born and an American citizen, and also, of course, to her career in America that was outside of Italy, was the greatest part of her career, from the Met in New York to Chicago, Dallas, and all the concert tours also that were going throughout the country several times in the late 50s, and then even during the farewell tour in the early 70s, she was all around America to tour. So it was a very, very important place, important audience to her.
We had a man in black. Yeah, thank you, sir.
I just have a quick question. I'm curious, you know, it's real easy from the film to see similarities between Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas. They have a certain quality that seems similar, and it struck me as being the qualities that struck Onassis. And I was just curious, what was the opinion you drew from the research of Onassis? He struck me as being kind of a pig in the film, you know, and his reactions to these women and the way he kind of did what he did. I'm curious what you thought.
You know, it's a film that gives the opportunity for everyone to have their own opinion and judgment. And I think that's what's great about it. I'm not imposing my own judgment in the film as a filmmaker, and I really like that aspect because everyone can relate to different things and have their opinion and have the freedom of that opinion.
You should run for politics.
If you want a personal answer, I consider Onassis as being the love of her life and her soulmate, and I think that's what mattered the most, and that's what matters the most to me. That's a personal answer.
Can we kind of extend it? I thought it was very poignant that the way she reacted, because she found out obviously about Jackie in the paper like everyone else.
That's right.
But her reaction I don't think was typical. She thought about it and she was hurt. Obviously it was the love of her life.
Of course.
But she also forgave him.
Yeah.
And can you talk about that crazy dynamic? There's something really special about her reaction to it. She didn't turn it into something of turmoil. It became something that she could actually fix in a way, which was unique for her because most things were taken kind of away from her. She didn't have the capacity to control the critics, but she did. She made an effort with Onassis in the end.
It was a very unique relationship, so she wouldn't deal with it as with any other kind of relationship. As I said, I think they were soulmates, and to her and to him, despite everything that happened, because sometimes our choices in life do not reflect our inner world, shall we say, and that was one example. The truth is, he realized almost right away that he had done a mistake, because in truth, he was at her door 3 weeks after the marriage with Jackie. He was back. And the fact that that relationship continued, despite the marriage, of course is very untypical and conventional, but still it existed, and it was still a very strong relationship, no matter what we call it. She calls it a passionate friendship, shall we say. So, what matters the most is that it still had something, and that it existed, and it didn't vanish with the marriage, which of course was hard and hurtful, and it doesn't remove the hurt whatsoever. But there was something greater to it also, and she only passed a year and a half after him.
I'm going to say heartbroken in that sense. Yeah. I've got to ask a question that you probably don't get asked too much. The amazing fashion that she had throughout her life, her jewelry choices, her choices in the way she appeared to audiences. Obviously her voice is the most important thing that people remember. But as far as when we think of La Divina, so much of the way she chose to appear was something most people don't talk, and you show us so many different versions of her fashion being important without really talking about it. You just show it to us. And I know you have a little bit of fashion history. Can you talk a bit about the importance of showing just how amazing she looked?
I think there's not much to talk about. We can see it all, right? I think she became very influential in fashion and developed a sense of style that was quite unique. And my background as a fashion photographer definitely had an appreciation for that. The story is that she was, as you may recall in the beginning of the film, rather not exactly slim and not exact. But in the early 50s, she got to watch Roman Holidays with Audrey Hepburn. And with her willpower, she decided that she would look just like Audrey. And in less than a year, she did.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to close it out. Guys, we do have to exit.
Thank you.
And Tom will be here for a little bit more if you guys want to exit with us and talk with Tom some more.